Hi guys, so I wanted to create a video for you for today's lesson. Today's lesson is about gaining a better understanding of how the Holocaust took place in terms of the timeline of events. Oftentimes we think that the Holocaust is an event that occurred suddenly and overnight, but in reality, Hitler and the Nazis very slowly and carefully built up to the Holocaust. They slowly took away the rights and the humanity of the Jewish people by using a combination of increasingly restrictive laws and propaganda, until they had created an atmosphere in Germany where the German people didn't really, I'm not going to say notice the Holocaust, but they didn't fight it because of all of this work that the Nazis had been, laying the groundwork for 10 years. In order to never let an event like this happen again, we must understand the steps building up to something like the Holocaust or any genocide, in order to recognize prejudice and discrimination at its source. In addition, you'll be reading an article that reviews how the Nazis justified these crimes with fake science and extreme nationalism. So the first thing you're going to do is obviously watch this video, which you are doing. And while you're doing that, you're going to be completing the timeline activity. It looks like this. So while I'm going through the PowerPoint, you're going to be filling in these dates. You don't have to write like word for word what I have on the PowerPoint, but you should know like what was this event that happened at this date. Not all of the events in the PowerPoint are going to be here, okay? So only when it's over here do you need to pause this video and complete this worksheet. After I'm done with that, what you'll do is you will read this article right here. It is titled "The Victims of the Nazi Era, Racial Ideology of the Holocaust." And basically what it does is it explains how the Nazis used this fake science of race and different ideas to justify what they were doing, okay? So it includes like this chart here, like how do you racially tell a German from a Jew? And, this is all fake science that the Nazis used and, used over and over and over again. And people started to believe it was real, and this is what they used to justify. And so you're going to go ahead and read this article and answer these questions, okay? And then once you're done with the article, you will submit this whole worksheet, this whole worksheet on this Canvas assignment, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the PowerPoint. Okay, so Holocaust Timeline and article. So in 1919, this is when Hitler first starts talking about the quote-unquote Jewish question. And he says that the ultimate goal of government must definitely be the removal of the Jews altogether. I think it's important to understand that like this is a view and something that Hitler was attempting to achieve long before he came to power. In 1923, this is when we see Hitler's first attempt to overthrow the government. So he is put in jail. He was sentenced to a longer term, got out after 9 months, which is funny to think about. I mean, not funny, haha, not funny, but like, interesting to think about the fact that like people knew Hitler was trying to do this. He had tried to do it before, yet, didn't really matter in the long run. So he is let out of jail and he becomes the leader of the Nazis in 1925. So between 1923 and 1925, Hitler is kind of like climbing the ranks of the Nazi party. So what the Nazis were is they were a political party in Germany, similar to our, Republican, Democrat, Independent, one of these. So they were like this offshoot of a political party and Hitler starts to climb the ranks of that political party. In 1933, Hitler is appointed as a government official, and then Nazis actually from 1925 to 1923, Nazis begin winning elections in Germany. They are officially elected to office in the Weimar Republic, which was the German government at the time. So they're starting to build up power, and then Hitler, runs for a high-ranking government official. He loses the election, but the leader of Germany during the time appoints him as Chancellor, which is kind of like this cabinet advisory position, because he sees that the people of Germany, so many of them like Hitler. So he appoints him as a chancellor. So, that was his first mistake. And then in 1933, we have something called the Reichstag Fire. So the German parliament building burns down. And what the Nazis do is they blame the communists. And there's pretty significant evidence to say that it was actually the Nazis who did this. But they blame the communists, and then Hindenburg, I can't remember if it's prime minister or president, but the leader of the Weimar Republic in Germany basically approves this Reichstag Fire decree, which gives the government extreme powers during this time. It took away people's individual rights. The government was able to start arresting political opponents, and it basically centralized power with the centralized government. And Hitler took this opportunity upon Hindenburg's death after this Reichstag Fire decree to basically declare himself dictator, remove all his political opponents, and basically install the Nazis as the single political party of the time. So then in 1933, the first concentration camp is built, and it is used for political opponents. So they're not starting to throw like Jewish people in these camps at this point. So this is really used for political opponents. So Hitler is using these camps to kind of like consolidate his power. In 1933, there is then a nationwide Jewish boycott. So the Nazis are using propaganda posters. You can see in this photo right here, there are, paramilitary Nazi people standing outside of a Jewish store with signs saying like, don't come in here. And so if you're a normal Jewish person, like, you're not going to go up to these soldiers and be like, let me in the store, right? And so it created this atmosphere of like, this is what we're going to be doing. And this was really the beginning of the campaign against Jews in 1933. And so then in 1933, we also see the law for the restoration of professional and civil service. So this basically says that if you are Jewish, you cannot be a civil service job. So this is like a lawyer, a teacher. So this is a letter right here notifying a teacher that she's been dismissed from her job for being Jewish. And so this is where we begin to see the slow like removal of Jewish people from public life. You're taking away their power in society, you're taking away their jobs, you're taking away their economic ability to support themselves. And then in 1933, we also see the law on the limits of Jews in public. So this limits the number of Jewish students in any public school to only 5%. So we start to see many new Jewish students during this time moving into private schools. This is when public schools also begin teaching Nazi ideals, love Hitler, obedience to the state, militarism, racism, anti-Semitism being taught in the actual public classroom. So over here we have a poem. It says, "My Führer, I know you well and love you," and Führer is referring to Hitler, dearly. "Like father and mother, I always want to be obedient to you, like I am to father and mother. And when I grow up, I will help you, like I will father and mother. You should feel loyal, joy because of me, like father and mother," right? So you're teaching this like, Hitler is the end all be all. You are to be obedient to the state, and you are to function as a helpful part of the state. In 1933, we also see the law for the prevention of offspring with hereditary disease. So the article you're going to read is going to explain a lot about, Hitler and the Nazis' racial ideas. They believed in a pure German race, and any imperfection had to be removed. So they started to forcibly sterilize certain people with mental or physical disabilities. If you were deaf or blind or had other disabilities, this included anyone who was Roma. This would be that gypsy group of people, homosexuals, black people, all of these things. They started to actually sterilize these people so they couldn't reproduce. And so between 1933 and 1935, we start to see a lot of these little laws chipping away at the humanity and the power of Jewish people in society. And then in 1935, we have a really important law that is passed. It's called the Nuremberg Race Laws. This is the legal framework for the systematic persecution of Jews in Germany. So basically what these race laws say is that if you have 3 to 4 Jewish grandparents, you are Jewish racially. Doesn't matter what religion you practice, doesn't matter where you were born, doesn't matter where you come from, it makes you Jewish. It also took away the citizenship of Jewish people. right? So now they were no longer citizens. It banned marriage and sexual relations between Jews and German citizens. And so this law right here was the like landmark law that was like, you are no longer a citizen of Germany and you are simply a Jew. Okay? No matter what, anything else outside of it, that's what it was. And so this was when it starts to get really bad for Jewish people in Germany. Propaganda. So propaganda, guys, was huge. Propaganda is used to really put an idea in people's heads until they believe that idea. When you see it, you start to believe it. And so this is just an example of an anti-Semitic exhibition that actually toured around Germany. And basically it was this like whole museum exhibition of, Jews being the enemy of the German people. More than 400,000 people attended. And so you're just spewing this false information about the Jewish people, harming citizens and harming the state and all these things that were untrue until people start to believe it. This is when Hitler annexes Austria. So this is the Munich Agreement. All right. So this is when we start to begin to see 1938, the policy of appeasement, right, and the buildup to World War II. In 1938, we then have Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was a really important event in the buildup of the Holocaust. This was a night when members of the SA, which was the Nazi police force, and the Hitler Youth carried out a wave of anti-Jewish violence and vandalism. They destroyed synagogues all over Germany. They destroyed Jewish-owned businesses. And you can see all the broken glass. And so Kristallnacht means night of broken glass. Because, everybody woke up in the morning and all across Germany, windows were broken and buildings destroyed. This was a key turning point as well, a very big event. In 1938, we get the Decree on the Elimination of Jews from Economic Life. So this banned Jewish people from basically trading or selling, could not sell any good or service of any kind. So this, once again, is basically taking away Jewish people's ability to support themselves. They can't go get a job. How are they supposed to survive, At this point, they're also taking away homes from Jewish people. So if you were a Jewish person and you owned a home, you didn't own that home anymore. And so they're kind of forcing Jewish people into this, an inability to care for themselves and support themselves and to participate in the economy in any way. From 1933 to 1939, there are more than 400 decrees and regulations restricting all aspects of Jewish life, and it included all levels of government. Jews were forced to give up property, move into their basements, sell or give away all of their belongings. Homes and goods were then given to the Germans. So if you're a German, you're receiving homes, you're receiving goods, you're receiving free things. And many, many people did not stand up and say, wait, where's all this stuff coming from? Because it was coming from the Jewish people that it was being taken from. But the German people were benefiting from it. And so I just think it's important, right, that this is that slow buildup. And this is why it's so important that we talk about this, because it's important to recognize, it didn't go from Jewish people being a part of life to all of a sudden Jewish people being in concentration camps. It was slow and slow and slow. And every other week, a different part, a different aspect of life, a different aspect of Jewish humanity was taken away. And people just didn't stop it, right? And this is why it's so important to recognize how these things happen so that we can stand up against it in our own society. So in 1939, Germany invades Poland, and this is when we see the beginning of World War II. In 1940, Auschwitz concentration camp was opened. This is going to be the largest camp. It was located in Portland. It was a forced work camp, and the main entrance stated that work makes one free, which is, ironic. In 1940, the Warsaw ghetto was sealed. So remember in the video, they talked about, these ghettos. This is where Jewish people, once their homes were taken from them, they would start to move these Jewish people into ghettos. All right. This was areas of the city that were, segregated as being a Jewish quarter at this point. And so then they started to seal these ghettos off. And so this is just when we see, the Germans and the Nazis just really controlling the movement of Jewish people. You know, they wouldn't let Jewish people leave the